Hey, modern fans and followers, I presume that you and your beloved are fine and dandy. It is social activist come good-hearted preacher, Professor S. Suresh back with absolute ecstasy for my 115th video on annual of publication on YouTube today, 29th November 2020, Sunday. The topic for today is child labor and child abuse preventive measures. Child labor refers to the exploitation of children for any form of work that deprives children of the childhood, interferes with their ability to attend regular school, and is mentally, physically, socially, or morally harmful. Such exploitation is prohibited by legislation worldwide, although these laws do not consider all work by children as child labor. Exceptions include work by child artists, family duty, supervised training, and some forms of child work practiced by Amish children as well as the indigenous children in the US. Child labor has existed to varying extents throughout history. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, many children aged 5 to 14 from poor families worked in Western nations and their colonies alike. These children mainly worked in agriculture, home-based assembly operations, factories, mining, and services such as newsboys. Some worked night shifts lasting 12 hours. With the rise of household income, availability of schools, and passage of child labor laws, the incidence rates of child labor fell. In the world's poorest countries, around 1 in 4 children are engaged in child labor, the highest number of whom, 29%, live in sub-Saharan Africa. In 2017, 4 African nations, Mali, Benin, Chad, and Guinea-Bissau, witnessed over 50% of children aged 5 to 14 working. Worldwide, agriculture is the largest employer of child labor. The vast majority of child labor is found in rural settings and informal urban economies. Children are predominantly employed by their parents rather than factories. Poverty and lack of schools are considered the primary cause of child labor. Globally, the incidence of child labor decreased from 25% to 10% between 1960 and 2003, according to the World Bank. Nevertheless, the total number of child laborers remains high, with the UNICEF and International Labour Organization (ILO) acknowledging an estimated 168 million children aged 5 to 17 worldwide were involved in child labor in 2013. Child labor forms an intrinsic part of pre-industrial economies. In pre-industrial societies, there is rarely a concept of childhood in the modern sense. Children often begin to actively participate in activities such as child rearing, hunting, and farming as soon as they are competent. In many societies, children as young as 13 are seen as adults and engage in the same activities as adults. The work of children was important in pre-industrial societies as children needed to provide the labor for their survival and that of the group. Pre-industrial societies were characterized by low productivity and short life expectancy. Preventing children from participating in productive work would be more harmful to their welfare and that of the group in the long run. In pre-industrial societies, there was little need for children to attend school. This is especially the case in non-literate societies. Most pre-industrial skill and knowledge were amenable to being passed down through direct mentoring or apprenticing by competent adults. With the onset of the Industrial Revolution in Britain in the late 18th century, there was a rapid increase in the industrial exploitation of labor, including child labor. Industrial cities such as Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool rapidly grew from small villages into large cities and improving child mortality rates. These cities grew in the population that was rapidly growing due to increased agricultural output. This process was replicated in other industrializing countries. The Victorian era, in particular, became notorious for the conditions under which children were employed. Children as young as 4 were employed in production factories and mines, working long hours in dangerous, often fatal working conditions. In coal mines, children would crawl through tunnels too narrow and too low for others. Children also worked as errand boys, causing sweepers, shoe blacks, or selling matches, flowers, and other cheap goods. Some children undertook work as apprentices to respectable trades such as building or as domestic servants. There were over 120,000 domestic servants in London in the mid 18th century. Working hours were too long. Builders worked 64 hours a week in the summer and 52 hours in winter, while servants worked 80-hour weeks. Child labor played an important role in the Industrial Revolution from its onset, often brought about by economic hardship. The children of the poor were expected to contribute to the family income. The 19th century Great Britain, one-third of poor families were without a breadwinner as a result of death or abandonment, obliging many children to work from a young age. In England and Scotland in 1788, two-thirds of the workers in 143 water-powered cotton mills were described as children. A high number of children also worked as prostitutes. The author Charles Dickens worked at the age of 12 in a blacking factory with his family in debtors' prison. Child wages were often low. The wages were as little as 10 to 20% of the adult male's wage. Karl Marx was an outspoken opponent of child labor, saying British industries could but live by sucking blood and children's blood too, and that US capital was financed by the capitalized blood of children. Letitia Elizabeth Landon castigated child labor in her 1835 poem, The Factory, portions of which she pointedly included in an 18th birthday tribute to Princess Victoria in 1837. Throughout the second half of the 19th century, child labor began to decline in industrialized societies due to regulation and economic factors because of the growth of trade unions. The regulation of child labor began from the earliest days of the Industrial Revolution. The first act to regulate child labor in Britain was passed in 1803. As early as 1802 and 1819, factory acts were passed to regulate the working hours of workhouse children in factories and cotton mills to 12 hours per day. These days were largely ineffective. These acts were largely ineffective after radical agitation by, for example, the short time committees in 1831. A royal commission recommended in 1833 that children aged 11 to 18 should work a maximum of 12 hours per day. Children aged 9 to 11, a maximum of 8 hours, and children under the age of 9 were no longer permitted to work. This act, however, only applied to the textile industry, and further agitation led to another act in 1847 limiting both adults and children to 10-hour working days. Lord Shaftesbury was an outspoken advocate of regulating child labor. As technology improved and proliferated, there was a greater need for educated employees. This saw an increase in schooling with the eventual introduction of compulsory schooling. Improved technology and automation could make child labor redundant. In the early 20th century, thousands of boys were employed in glass-making industries. Glass-making was a dangerous and tough job, especially without the current technologies. The process of making glass includes intense heat to melt glass, 3,133 degrees Fahrenheit. When the boys are at work, they are exposed to this heat. This could cause eye trouble, lung ailments, heat exhaustion, cuts, and burns. Since workers were paid by the piece, they had to work productively for hours without a break. Since furnaces had to be constantly burning, there were night shifts from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. Many factory owners preferred boys under 16 years of age. An estimated 1.7 million children under the age of 15 were employed in American industry by 1900. In 1910, over 2 million children in the same age group were employed in the US. These included children who rolled cigarettes, engaged in factory work, worked as bobbin duffers in textile mills, worked in coal mines, and were employed in canneries. Louis Hines' photographs of child laborers in the 1910s powerfully evoked the plight of working children in the American South. Hines took these photographs between 1908 and 1917 as a staff photographer for the National Child Labor Committee. Factories and mines are not the only places where child labor was prevalent in the early 20th century. Home-based manufacturing across the US and Europe employed children as well. Governments and reformers argued that labor in factories must be regulated and that the state had an obligation to provide welfare to the poor. Legislation that followed had the effect of moving work out of factories and into urban homes. Families and women in particular preferred it because it allowed them to generate income while taking care of household duties. Home-based manufacturing operations were active year-round. Families willingly deployed their children in these income-generating home enterprises, cottage industries. In many cases, men work from home. In France, over 58% of garment workers operated out of their homes. In Germany, the number of full-time home operations nearly doubled between 1882 and 1907. And in the US, millions of families operated out of home 7 days a week, year-round, to produce garments, shoes, artificial flowers, feathers, matchboxes, toys, umbrellas, and other products. Children aged 5 to 14 worked alongside their parents Home-based operations and child labor in Australia, Britain, Australia, and other parts of the world was common. Rural areas similarly saw families deploying their children in agriculture. In 1946, Frieda S. Miller, the director of the US Department of Labor, told the ILO that these home-based operations offered low wages, long hours, child labor, unhealthy and unsanitary working conditions. Child labor is still common in many parts of the world. Estimates for child labor vary. It ranges from 250 to 304 million if children aged 5 to 17 involved in any economic activity are counted. Till the age of 18, they are considered as children only. If light occasional work is excluded, ILO estimates there are 153 million child laborers aged 5 to 14 worldwide in 2008. This is about 2 million less than ILO estimate for child laborers in 2004. Some 60% of the child labor was involved in agricultural activities such as farming, dairy, fisheries, and forestry. Another 25% of child laborers were in service activities such as retail, hawking, goods, restaurants, load and transfer of goods, storage, picking and recycling trash, polishing shoes, domestic help, and other services. The remaining 15% labored in assembly and manufacturing in informal economy, home-based enterprises, factories, mines, packaging salt, operating machinery, and such operations. 2 out of 3 child workers work alongside their parents in unpaid family work situations. Some children work as guides for tourists, sometimes combined with the bringing in business for shops and restaurants. Child labor predominantly occurs in rural areas, 70%, and informal in the urban sector, 26%. Contrary to popular belief, most child laborers are employed by their parents rather than in manufacturing or formal economy. Some poor families sell off the children also. Children who work for pay or in-kind compensation are usually found in rural settings as opposed to urban centers. Less than 3% of child labor and 5 to 14 across the world work outside their household or away from their parents. Child labor accounts for 22% of the workforce in Asia, 32% in Africa, 17% in Latin America, 1% in the US, Canada, Europe, and other wealthy nations. The proportion of child laborers varies greatly among countries and even regions inside those countries. Africa has the highest percentage of children aged 5 to 17 employed as child labor and a total of over 65 million. Asia, with its larger population, has the largest number of children employed as child labor at about 114 million. Latin America and the Caribbean region have lower overall population density, but 14 million child laborers has high incidence rates too. Accurate present-day child labor information is difficult to obtain because of disagreements between data sources as to what constitutes child labor. In some countries, government policy contributes to this difficulty. In 2014, the US Department of Labor issued a list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor, where China was attributed 12 goods, the majority of which were produced by both underage children and indentured laborers. The report listed electronics, garments, toys, and coats among other goods. The Maplecroft Child Labor Index 2012 survey reports that 76 countries pose extreme child labor complicity risks for companies operating worldwide. The 10 highest risk countries in 2012 ranked in decreasing order were Myanmar, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, DR Congo, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, Burundi, Pakistan, and Ethiopia. Of the major growth economies, Maplecroft ranked Philippines 25th riskiest, India 27th, China 36th, Vietnam 37th, Indonesia 46th, and Brazil 54th. All of them rated to involve extreme risk of child labor uncertainties to corporations seeking to invest in developing world and import products from emerging markets. ILO suggests poverty is the greatest single cause behind child labor. For impoverished households, income from a child's work is usually crucial for his or her own survival or for that of the household. Income from working children, even if small, may be between 25 and 40% of the household income. Other scholars, such as Harsh on African child labor and Edmonds and Parnick on global child labor, have reached the same conclusion. Lack of meaningful alternatives such as affordable schools and quality education, according to ILO, is another major factor driving children to harmful labor. Children work because they have nothing better to do. In communities, particularly rural areas where between 60 to 70% of child labor is prevalent, do not possess adequate school facilities. Even when schools are sometimes available, they are too far away. difficult to reach, unaffordable, or the quality of education is so poor that parents wonder if going to school is really worth it. In European history, when child labor was common, as well as in contemporary child labor of modern world, certain cultural beliefs have rationalized child labor and thereby encouraged it. Some view that work is good for the character building and skill development of children. In many cultures, particular where the informal economy and small household businesses thrive, the cultural tradition is that children follow in their parents' footsteps. Child labor then is means to learn and practice the trade from a very early age. Similarly, in many cultures, without culture, the education of girls is less valued, or girls are simply not expected to need formal schooling, and these girls pushed into child labor, such as providing domestic services. Macroeconomic causes encourage where widespread child labor across the world over most of human history. They suggest that the causes for child labor include both the demand and supply side. While poverty and unavailability of good schools explain the child labor supply side, they suggest that the growth of low-paying informal economy rather than high-paying formal economy is amongst the causes of the demand side. Other scholars too suggest that inflexible labor market, size of informal economy, inability of industries to scale up, and lack of modern manufacturing technologies are major macroeconomic factors affecting demand and acceptability of child labor. In 2015, India is home to the largest number of children who are working illegally in various industrial industries. Agriculture in India is the largest sector where many children work at early ages to help support the family. Many of these children are forced to work at young ages due to many family factors such as unemployment, large families, poverty, and lack of parental education. This is often the major cause of the high rate of child labor in India. On 23rd June 1757, the English East India Company defeated Siraj-ud-Dowlah, the Nawab of Bengal, in the Battle of Plassey. The British thus became masters of East India, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, a prosperous region with a flourishing agriculture, industry, and trade. This led to many children being forced into labor due to the increasing need for cheap labor to produce large number of goods. Many multinationals often employ children because that they can be recruited for less pay and have more endurance to utilize in factory environments. Another reason many Indian children were hired was because they lacked knowledge of the basic rights. They did not cause trouble or complaint, and they were often more trustworthy. The innocence that comes with childhood was utilized to make a profit by many and was encouraged by the need for family income. Variety of Indian social scientists as well as non-governmental organizations, NGOs, has done extensive research on numeric figures of child labor found in India and determined that India contributes to one-third of Asia's child labor and one-fourth of the world's child labor. Due to many children being illegally employed, the Indian government began to take extensive actions to reduce the number of children working and to focus on the importance of facilitating the proper growth and development of children. International influences helped to encourage legal actions to be taken in India, such as the Geneva Declaration of the Right of Children Act was passed in 1924. This act was followed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which incorporated the basic human rights and needs of children for proper progression and growth in their younger years. These international acts encouraged major changes to the workforce in India, which occurred in 1986 when the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act was put into place. This act prohibited hiring children younger than the age of 14 and from working in hazardous conditions. Due to increase of regulations and legal restrictions on child labor, there has been 64% decline in child labor from 1993 to 2005. Although this is a great decrease in India, there is still higher numbers of children working in the rural areas of India. With 85% of the child labor occurring in rural areas and 15% occurring in urban areas, there are still substantial areas of concern for India. India's legislation since 1986, which allows work by children in non-hazardous industry. In 2013, the Punjab and Haryana High Court gave a landmark order the director that there shall be a total ban on employment of children up to the age of 14 years, these hazardous or non-hazardous industries. However, the court ruled that a child can work with this or a family in family-based trades occupations for the purpose of learning a new trade, craftsmanship, or vocation. Almost every country in the world has laws relating to and aimed at preventing child labor. ILO has helped set international law which most countries have signed on and ratified. According to ILO Minimum Age Convention C-138 of 1973, child labor refers to any work performed by children under the age of 12, non-light work done by children aged 12 to 14, and hazardous work done by children aged 15 to 17. Light work was defined under the convention as any work that does not harm a child's health and development and that does not interfere with his or her attendance at school. This convention has been ratified by 171 countries. The United Nations adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1990, which was subsequently ratified by 193 countries. Article 32 of the Convention addresses child labor as follows. Parties recognize the right of the child to be protected from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with the child's education or be harmful to the child's health or physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development. Under Article 1 of the 1990 Convention, a child is defined as every human below the age of 18 years, as I said before, unless under the law applicable to the child, the majority is attained earlier. Article 28 of this convention requires states to make primary education compulsory and available free to all. 195 countries are party to this convention. Only 2 nations have not ratified the treaty. Somalia and the US in 1999, ILO helped lead the Worst Forms Convention A182 C182, which has so far been signed upon and domestically ratified by 151 countries, including the US. This international law prohibits worst forms of child labor, defined as all forms of slavery and slavery-like practices such as child trafficking, debt bondage, and forced labor, including forced recruitment of children into armed conflict. The law also prohibits the trafficking, debt bondage, and forced labor, including forced recruitment of children. Okay. This law also prohibits the use of a child for prostitution or the production of pornography. Child labor in illicit activities such as drug production and trafficking and in hazardous work. Both the Worst Forms Convention C182 and Minimum Age Convention C138 are examples of international labor standards implemented through the ILO that deal with the child labor. In addition to setting the international law, the United Nations initiated the International Program on the Elimination of Child Labor (IPEC) in 1992. This initiative aims to progressively eliminate child labor through strengthening national capacities to address some of the causes of child labor. Amongst the key initiatives is a so-called time-bounded program countries where child labor is most prevalent and schooling opportunities lacking. The initiative seeks to achieve, amongst other things, universal primary school availability. The IPEC has expanded to at least the following target countries: Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Democratic Republic of Congo, El Salvador, Nepal, Tanzania and Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Philippines, Senegal, South Africa, and Turkey. Targeted child labor campaigns were initiated by IPEC in order to advocate for prevention and elimination of all forms of child labor. The Global Music Against Child Labor initiative was launched in 2013 in order to involve socially excluded children in structured musical activity and education efforts to help protect them from child labor. Federal legislation was passed in 1916 and again in 1919, but both laws were declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Although the number of child workers declined dramatically during the 1920s and 1930s, It was not until the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938 that federal regulation of child labor finally became a reality. Scholars disagree on the best legal course forward to address child labor. Some suggest the need for laws that place a blanket ban on any work by children less than 18 years old. Others suggest the current international laws are enough and the need for a more engaging approach to achieve the ultimate goals. Some scholars suggest any labor by children under 18 years or less is wrong, since this encourages illiteracy, inhuman work, and lower investment in human capital. Child labor claim these activists also teach poor labor standards for adults, depresses the wages of adults in developing countries as well as the developed countries, and dooms the third world economies to low skilled jobs only capable of producing poor quality, cheap exports. More children that work in poor countries, the fewer and worse paid are the jobs for adults in these countries. In other words, there are moral and economic reasons that justify a blanket ban on child labor from children aged 18 years or less everywhere in the world. Other scholars suggest that these arguments are flawed, ignores the history, and more laws will do more harm than good. According to them, child labor is merely the symptom of a greater disease called poverty. If laws ban all lawful work that enables people to survive, informal economy, illicit operations, and underground businesses will thrive. These will increase abuse of the children. In poor countries with very high incidence rate of child labor, such as Ethiopia, Chad, Niger, and Nepal, schools are not available. The few schools that exist offer poor quality education or are unaffordable. The alternatives for children who currently work train these studies are worse. Grinding, subsistence farming, militia, or prostitution. Child labor is not a choice, it is a necessity, the only option for survival. It is currently the least undesirable of a set of very bad choices. These scholars suggest from the studies of economic and social data that early 20th century child labor in Europe and the US ended in large part as a result of the economic development of the formal regulated economy, technology development, and general prosperity. Child labor laws and ILO conventions came later. Edmund suggests even in contemporary times, the incidence of child labor in Vietnam has rapidly reduced following economic reforms and GDP growth, gross domestic product. These scholars suggest economic engagement, emphasis on opening quality schools rather than more laws, and expanding economically relevant social skill development opportunities in the third world. International legal actions such as trade sanctions increase child labor. The Incredible Bread Machine, a book published by World Research Incorporated in 1974, stated that child labor was a particular target of early reformers. William Cook Statler wrote at the time about these reformers who, witnessing children at work in the factories, thought to themselves how much more delightful would have been the gamble of the free limbs on the hillside, the sight of a green mead with its spangles of buttercups and daisies, the song of the bird and the humming bee. But for many of these children, the factory system meant quite literally the only chance for survival. Today, we overlook the fact that death from starvation and exposure was a common fate before the Industrial Revolution. For the pre-capitalist economy was barely able to support the population. Yes, children were working formally, they would have starved. It was only as goods were produced in greater abundance at a lower cost that men would support their families without sending the children to work. It was not the reformer or the politician that ended the grim necessity of child labor. It was capitalism. Concerns have often been raised over the buying public's moral complicity in purchasing products assembled or otherwise manufactured in developing countries with the child labor. However, others have raised concerns that boycotting products manufactured through child labor may force these children to turn to more dangerous or strenuous professions such as prostitution or agriculture. For example, a UNICEF study found that after the Child Labor Deterrence Act was introduced in the US, an estimated 50,000 children were dismissed from the garment industry jobs in Bangladesh, leaving many to resort to jobs such as stone crushing, street hustling, and prostitution jobs that are more hazardous and exploitative than garment production. The study suggests that boycotts are blunt instruments with the long-term consequences that can actually harm rather than help the children involved. According to Milton Friedman, before the Industrial Revolution, virtually all children worked in agriculture. During the Industrial Revolution, many of these children moved from farm work to factory work. Over time, as real wages rose, parents became able to afford to send children to school instead of work. And as a result, child labor declined both before and after legislation. The IPEC, founded in 1992, aims to eliminate child labor. It operates in 88 countries and is the largest program of its kind in the world. IPEC works with international and government agencies, NGOs, and the media, and children with their families to end child labor and provide children with education and assistance. From 2008 to 2013, the ILO operated a program through IPEC entitled Combating Abusive Child Labor, CACL2. The project, funded by the European Union, contributed to the government of Pakistan by providing alternative opportunities for vocational training and education to children withdrawn from the worst forms of child labor. Periodically, governments, employers, and workers' organizations are meeting global conference to assess progress and remaining obstacles and to agree measures to eliminate the worst forms of child labor. By 2016, first in Oslo 1997, secondly in The Hague 2010, the third global conference on child labor took place in Brasilia. On October 2013, the fourth global conference is scheduled to be held in Buenos Aires, Argentina, 14 to 16 November 2017. The term child labor can be misleading when it confuses harmful work with employment that may be beneficial to children. It can also ignore harmful work outside employment and any benefits children normally derive from their work. Domestic work is an example of families where the rich must work at cleaning, cooking. All families where the rich must work at cleaning, cooking, caring, and more to maintain their homes. In most families in the world, this process extends to productive activities, especially herding and various types of agriculture, and to a variety of small family businesses. Where trading is a significant feature of social life, children can start trading in small items at an early age, often in the company of family members or peers. Work is undertaken from an early age by a vast number of children in the world, and many have a natural place in growing up. Work can contribute to the well-being of children in a variety of ways. Children often choose to work to improve their lives, both in the short and long term. At the material level, children's work often contributes to producing food or earning income that benefits themselves and their families, and such income is especially important when their families are poor. Work can provide an escape from debilitating poverty, sometimes by allowing a young person to move away from an improvised environment. Young people often enjoy work, especially paid work or when work involves a company of peers. Even when work is intensive and enforced, children often find ways to combine the work with the play. While full-time work hinders schooling, the empirical evidence is varied on the relationships between part-time work and school. Sometimes even part-time work may hinder school attendance or performance. On the other hand, many poor children work for resources to attend school. Children who are not doing well at school sometimes seek more satisfactory experiences in work. Good relations with the supervisor at work can provide relief from tensions that children feel at school and home. In the modern world, school education has become so central to society that school work has become the dominant work for most children, often replacing participation in productive work. If school curricula quality do not provide children with appropriate skills for available jobs, or if children do not have the aptitude for schoolwork, school may impede the learning of skills such as agriculture, which will become necessary for future livelihood. Here are a few tips for helping end child labor. Educate yourself. Contact retail stores, manufacturers, and importers. Buy fair trade and sweatshop-free products wherever possible. Grow more of your own food. Share your time and money. Contact local, regional, and national legislators. Contact businesses that do business in countries that are child labor. Invest ethically, contact government leaders, educate others. Prime causes of child labor are poverty and unemployment levels are high. Access to compulsory free education is limited. Existing laws or codes of conduct are often violated. Laws and enforcement are often inadequate. National laws often include exemptions. Workers' rights are repressed. The global economy intensifies the effects of some factors, debt and child welfare. Child abuse is very much prevalent in every society. Child abuse is any action by another person, adult or child, that causes a significant harm to a child. Child abuse can result from physical, emotional, or sexual harm. While child abuse is often in the form of an action, there are also examples of inaction that cause harm, such as neglect. It is a responsibility of the society to implement primary prevention programs, particularly family and schools, to help children to grow and develop. These primary preventive measures that can help the society to overcome from child abuse problem. Mental health professionals and pediatricians, along with the child protection services, can help the child to deal with the consequences of child abuse. Abuse is any form of behavior or act that is intentional or have authority over, intimidate, force, or hurt another person. It's a mishandling of an authority which uses the connections of closeness, faith, and reliance to make the sufferer vulnerable. Abuse can be affective, mental, monetary, sexual, and bodily, but abuse is not restricted to one of these. Any exploitation, mishandling, or misuse of control for the intention of conniving the behaviors, events, opinions, or thoughts of another person is abuse. Child abuse is any action, behavior, and gestures by another person, adult or child, that causes considerable damage to a child. It can be physical, sexual, or emotional, but can just as often be about a lack of affection, care, and attention. Who in 2002 defines child abuse and neglect or child maltreatment as all forms of physical or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, or neglectful action, or commercial or other mistreatment, ensuring indefinite or possible harm to the child's health and continued existence, growth, or self esteem in the circumstances of the relationship of accountability, stress, or authority. Different forms of child abuse. Abuse or offensive behaviors are an act that comes in various forms, but the most common result of abuse is the emotional effect on the child, which is long term. What is called post-traumatic stress disorder. If the child is being abused by a slap, a cruel remark, gritty stillness, the conclusions a child feels insecure is the child feels insecure, uncared for, and all alone. There are mainly four forms of child abuse that has been defined: physical abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. It is very essential to remind that if a child is suffering from one type of abuse, it is most likely the child is suffering from many other forms of abuse as well. Children who have been physically abused may still feel the effects long after the injuries have healed. That's what I said, long-term effects. Being shaken, hit, or physically abused in any way as a child can lead to poor physical and mental health later in life, including depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, childhood behavior or conduct disorders, drug use, suicide attempts, obesity, sexually transmitted infections, and risky sexual behavior. Other long-term effects include not doing as well at school or education, criminal risk-taking behavior, drug and alcohol problems. Emotional abuse is often considered as less grave than other forms of abuse because it has no instant physical effects. But over time, emotional abuse can have a very grave long-term effects on a child's social, emotional, and physical health and development. The effects of child sexual abuse, CSA and nervous system, self-harm, sexual health, emotional and physical damage, guilt and shame, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Neglect could be physical, medical, educational, or emotional. Children who have been neglected may experience short-term and long-term effects that last throughout their life. Children who do not get the love and care they need from their parents may find it difficult to maintain healthy relationships with other people later in life, including their own children. Children who have been neglected are far more likely to experience mental health problems, including depression and post traumatic stress disorder. Young people who take who also take risks such as running away from home, breaking the law, abusing drugs or alcohol, and getting involved in dangerous relationships, putting them at risk from sexual exploitation. Some of the primary preventive measures are educating children about abuse, management of child abuse, responsibility of pediatrician and hospital management, ensuring the child's safety and well-being. A child who is being abused may feel guilty or ashamed or confused. He or she may not be afraid to tell anyone about the abuse, especially if the abuser is a parent, other relative, or a family friend. That's why it is vital to watch for red flags. Symptoms, signs and symptoms, such as withdrawal from friends or unusual activities, changes in behavior such as aggression, anger, hostility, or hyperactivity, or changes in school performance, depression, anxiety, or unusual fears, or a sudden loss of self-confidence, an apparent lack of supervision, frequent absences from school, reluctance to leave school activities as if he or she does not want to go home, attempts at running away, rebellious or defiant behavior, self-harm, or attempts at suicide. Specific signs and symptoms depending on the type of abuse can vary. Keep in mind that warning signs, red flags, are just warning signs. Below to probe deeper. The presence of warning signs does not necessarily mean that a child is being abused. Sometimes a parent's demeanor or behavior sends red flags about child abuse. Warning signs include a parent who shows little concern for the child, appears unable to recognize physical or emotional distress in the child, blames the child for the problems, consistently belittles or berates the child, and describes the child with negative terms such as worthless or evil. He expects a child to provide him or her with attention with and care, and seems jealous of the other family members getting attention from the child. Uses harsh physical discipline, demands an inappropriate level of physical or academic performance, severely limits the child's contact with others, offers conflicting or unconvincing explanations for a child's injuries or no explanation at all. Child health experts condemn the use of violence in any form, but some people still use corporal punishment, such as spanking, as a way to discipline the children. Any corporal punishment may leave emotional stress. Parental behaviors that cause pain, physical injury, or emotional trauma, even when done in the name of discipline, could be child abuse. Factors that may increase a person's risk of becoming abusive include a history of being abused or neglected as a child, physical or mental illness such as depression or PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, family crisis or stress, including domestic violence and other marital conflicts, or single parenting, a child in the family who is developmentally or physically disabled, financial stress, unemployment, or poverty, society, social or extended family isolation, poor understanding of child development and parenting skills, alcohol, drugs, or other substance abuse. You can take important steps to protect your child from exploitation and child abuse, as well as to prevent child abuse in your neighborhood and community. The goal is to provide safe, stable, nurturing relationships for children. Offer your child love and attention. Do not respond in anger. Think supervision. Know your child's caregivers. Emphasize when to say no. Teach your child how to stay safe online. Reach out. Stand up against child labor and child abuse on all possible days like Malala and Satyarthi. Focus on preventive measures rather than post such abuse and exploitation. Do not buy products made by children. Protect the children irrespective of the religion, race, skin color, etc. If the child exhibits any other such signs or symptoms, find out the possible cause or causes. Never leave the children alone, either at home or outside. Even the child care centers abuse the children and threaten them not to reveal such incidents even to their parents. Pedophiles abuse the children sexually, even make videos of such acts and threaten the children that they'll post it on net and keep repeating such molestations repeatedly. Some children are forced into prostitution and their lives are totally ruined. People in our present world are so perverted and act like savages, carnivores, predators, abusing the children sexually for unnatural sexual acts and torture them physically and mentally to the core. Poverty and literacy are the two prime causes of child labor and abuse. So educate poor children and also provide them food and shelter if you can afford it. There is a saying that you can see God in the smile of a child. Children are so innocent and vulnerable, but that innocence is exploited by some for their own gains, like forcing them to beg for arms, steal, and convert them as commercial sex workers. CSW. As I have mentioned umpteen times, perpetrators should be tortured to death, and this will be a lesson for other potential perpetrators. Law should be universal in nature and should be enforced fully. Eye for an eye is the right policy to put a full stop once and for all for such heinous crimes. Debates, discussion on open-ended topics like this can go on forever. Anyhow, let me pull the plug here. We'll meet again real soon with another interesting topic. Some of the statements, views expressed are solely mine, based on limited knowledge gained over 6 decades of personal experience. Always watch these videos with closed caption, subtitles for absolute 100% comprehension as per my sincere recommendation. Zillion times so far. I know I rushed through to complete the presentation in 20 minutes, which is the normal that I have set myself to retain the viewers' attention. But at the same time, I know pretty well that I am taking almost double the time or even triple the time, depending on the topic. And since I make honest attempts to cover the selected topic more elaborately, including so many intricate fine details, referring a wide variety of sources, in particular Wikipedia quite extensively, besides other articles and books published recently. Besides, of course, I sprinkle my own salt and pepper and season it with my personal experiences so far in my life and also intuition. Stay at home as much as possible to maintain social distancing, attributed to pandemic novel COVID-19, and prolong your lifespan. Lead a healthy life. God alone can put a stop to natural, unnatural, maybe biowar and cyber war events like pandemics, which may lead to apocalypse and extinction of all sentient species on Earth for no fault of others. Rest in peace and harmony.